118802. Okay, order placed.
Out there on this pandemic, Bloomberg has put together a resilience index, and it is really something to see the countries that have their act together and the countries that do not. No surprise really with the names for those that have been following this. But New Zealand, you know, and so much of this is almost a geographic removal. And yet Asia does better. Great to talk to the former Prime Minister of Finland, Mr. Butts, the other day as well. And then those that are challenged here, and I do want to make a point that so much of resilience is based off case analysis, which even our Sam Fazili says is a little bit shaky. I look much more at death dynamics, and hospitalizations, of course, have come front and center here in the last number of days. Amesh Adalja joins us now with Johns Hopkins Center of Health Security. Thrilled that he could be with us today. We talk about resilience, Dr. Adalja. Resilience comes from policy. Which nation seems to be most supple, most malleable at reacting to this pandemic and initiating constructive policy?
I would say that has to go to Taiwan and South Korea. These countries have been able to do, they were able to do in March and February what we can't do even in the United States now in November. And they were able to meet cases as they came because they had a robust policy of trying to interdict very early and being very proactive versus reactive. And they sprang into action very early. South Korea and the U.S. had their first cases on the same day and just looked.
Position open, short position at 118802.
Facing the consequences of that now as we enter these cold months where this virus's transmission is accelerating.
Amish, I want to talk about the vaccines in a second, but first, is there a danger that countries, that poorer countries, just won't have access to the vaccine, to any vaccine, quick enough?
I do think that's going to be the issue, and it's always the issue during an infectious disease emergency, where you find a disparity between the developed world and the developing world. And we saw that with 2009 H1N1. We still see it with vaccines like measles and polio. So this is going to be a major issue. One of the issues is also the fact that one of the vaccines, the Pfizer vaccine, requires an extreme cold chain, which is going to be hard to keep intact when you're talking about the developing world, where electricity may be spotty and we have difficulty even with refrigeration. So I do think that this is going to be a longer endeavor when you're talking about the world. The developed world may, mid-2021, have enough of their population vaccinated to have COVID-19 cease to be a public health problem, but it is going to be a challenge for many other parts of the world. And that's what the Bill and Melinda Gates, that's what the COVAX consortium, all of these other entities are trying to assure won't happen. But I do think it's going to be hard going for many of those countries.
Dr. Adalja, how much, are we focusing too much on these vaccines and the fact that a lot of these vaccines are coming even quicker than expected and not focusing enough on hospital capacity, especially in the U.S.? How critical is hospital access right now?
For the next several months, hospital capacity in the U.S. and around the world is going to be the major factor, because these vaccines are going to be coming, but they're not going to be available in big enough quantities to make a dent on all of the patients that are already hospitalized. There's around 80,000 Americans hospitalized now. That's something that we have to get through, and it's going to only continue as we go through the Thanksgiving holidays and we see that expected surge that's going to occur.
Right.
So this is something we have to think of these vaccines as lights at the end of the tunnel, but we still have a lot of tunnel to go, and a lot of people are going to die between now and the vaccines, and a lot of hospitals are going to be worrying about capacity long before the vaccine starts hitting the arms of Americans.
Dr. Adalja, would you get on an airplane this Thanksgiving holiday?
It's not actually the airplane itself that's the danger, because everybody is masked there and they've got a lot of mitigation. It's what you do when you get to your destination. That's the problem. It's not the conveyance by the airplane. It's
stop on profit at 118.78.
It's just what people do when they get to their where they're going.
Dr. Adalja, thank you so much. An update from Johns Hopkins here as we go into the holiday week, I should say. Of course, more there are. Terrific virus update, really quite good. She is the Lieutenant Governor of the Empire State, but Kathy Hochul is much more than that. She has a terrific perspective, not in the big urban areas, but the sprawl of any given state, including her, Western New York. In the 7 o'clock hour, Kathy Hochul. Stay with us. Futures up 28. This is Bloomberg.
Give you a sense of the real-time action. The 10-year yield tumbling now 11 basis points, so continuing in this knee-jerk risk-off feel.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance. Tom and Francine from London and New York. The focus on some of the haven assets. Let's get straight to your data check. Global stocks are actually advancing for a second day. Investors cheering the start of the U.S. President-elect Joe Biden's formal transition, but also prospect for more economic stimulus. Now, I'm looking at energy stocks. They're definitely leading the Stock 600 index higher. Travel companies, banks also notching gains. EasyJet and ICA Group rising after England also cutting its quarantine period for arrivals from high-risk countries. Now, haven assets broadly weaker. Bitcoin, though, extending its searing rally, surpassing some $19,000 for the first time since 2017. Strategists on Bitcoin and crypto fans alike seem to be rushing now to project its next record. Forecasts really varied from 25,000 to even 300,000 by the end of the next year. So take with a very big pinch of salt. Coming up, more Bloomberg Surveillance.
I'm moving stop on profit to 118.752. Okay.
for each side to understand the sensitivities of the other.
Former U.S. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger said the incoming Biden administration should move quickly to restore lines of communication with China that frayed during the Trump years, or risk a crisis that could escalate into military conflict.
Unless there is some basis for some cooperative action, the world will slide into a catastrophe comparable to World War I, with a technology that is even more difficult to control than the technology of the period then.
Their CPG history, their experience, and really how we might be able to combine together to really create this fantastic public company. And so we kind of got into the SPAC thing a little bit before it became such a hot method of going public.
Scenario for markets would be if the unemployment rate in November will begin to go higher.
Even before the pandemic, we had a lot of frailties.
Equity volatility and equity uncertainty still remains elevated.
I think we will have weathered the storm, and I do hope that the worst will be over by next summer.
We may experience a bit of a dip economically.
It isn't as much a risk of a double dip. It's a risk that we extend the rebound.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene, Jonathan Ferro, and Lisa Abramowitz.
From New York and London, for our audience worldwide, good morning, good morning. This is Bloomberg Surveillance live on Bloomberg TV and radio. Alongside Tom Keene and Lisa Abramowitz, I'm Jonathan Ferro. Tuesday morning, equities positive 0.7%. Tom Keene, Janet Yellen widely reported to be America's next Treasury Secretary.
Good conversations. I think Bloomberg really out front in this story. Talking to Jason Furman, who was across from Chair Yellen years ago at the chairman of Council Economic Advisors, but many other voices as well, John. It's going to be fascinating to see what she does in a very different job. The headline is she has to deal with Congress and the Senate.
And she's conditioned by the experience of the previous cycle, and I think that's really important, Tom. This is about avoiding a premature declaration of victory, and Chair Yellen has lived that, and I'm sure she won't want to make the same mistake twice.
Well, we'll see here, and there's many other announcements to come. I'm frankly, John, I know it's away from what we do here on radio and television, but I'm really focused on the Department of Defense after the chaos we've seen over the last number of weeks, so that'll be an important announcement as well. But, John, there's many, many others, and the backdrop here is maybe the clearing of uncertainty, and look where the markets are moving.
3,600 on the S&P 500. I know Dow. What is it, Tom? Dow what? 30?
Yeah, Dow's over 10,000, John. 29,831. The Dow is up 64% off the March bottom. On a log chart, it's actually a very elegant chart with all sorts of good features. And, you really want to, within the debate of those good conversations opening the show, John, you really, really wonder what the next leg is. And that's a huge debate into the Thanksgiving holiday.
Well, yesterday the small caps outperformed, and that's where the money's been going over the last couple of weeks. Lisa Abramowitz, the reality of the moment, though, We can't lose it. Look at the headline that's just crossed the Bloomberg. Airlines see pandemic losses reaching $157.2 billion across 2020, 2021. A lot of work still to do.
There's still a lot of work, and this really raises the question of what Janet Yellen will do. And I will say, just to follow up on what you guys were talking about, the market reaction to certainty, it's not just certainty. She is going to take an easy policy type of an approach, and she's probably going to reverse the Stephen Mnuchin clawback of some of that funding in short order and give the Fed more ammunition. We're going to be hearing 12:45 p.m. Fed Vice Chair Rich Clarida, ECB's Philip Lane, IMF's Kristalina Georgieva. They're speaking on a panel at the IMF about how to create a framework in a low-yield world, very much what the Fed and all central banks are concerned about. 1 p.m., the U.S. is selling $56 billion of 7-year notes. Interesting to see that yesterday the sale of 5-year notes did not do that well. Dealers had to take more. It actually came in with a higher yield. People pushing back with the expectation of more growth ahead, just ticking up, still very low. And at 1 p.m., President-elect Joe Biden and his Vice President Harris are going to be announcing key national security and foreign policy posts. This, Tom, is what you are watching. Either way, we're crystallizing what's ahead, especially after the GSA actually formally shepherded in the transition process yesterday. John?
Me or Tom? Tom, do you want to say something?
No, I don't want to say anything.
Sort of coughing a little bit.
John, I'm too focused on your new career as an influencer. You know, I mean, it's like the talk of everyone out there.
I was promoting my makeup in a commercial break.
You were the powder puff. Yeah, you know, it's good.
32.
I know.
Great product.
It's good.
Great product.
That's good. Instagram.
We can avoid that for now. I'm getting to the price action of this Tuesday morning. Let's get straight to it. Yesterday, really interesting session off the back of the positive vaccine news. Then a really decent, solid US PMI. Euro dollar out to 118.70, 119 briefly. Then we turned lower. The dollar pretty choppy, but I've got to say this morning, the trend is clear. It's a weaker dollar story. In the bond market, yields up by not even a basis point to 0.8586%. Commodities, there's a story here. We keep pushing higher. Copper, crude, up, and away. Up 0.8% on crude. Tom, to $43 and about 40 cents.
Very quickly, I know we want to get to our esteemed equity guest. Jeffrey Curry, Goldman Sachs, was lights out an hour ago, John. He was heated that this is where we break the bear market commodity trend.
Well, let's talk about energy equities too, up 30% or so over the last month. Phenomenal run in the energy space, not just in the commodity market, but in the stock market too. Joining us now, perfect guest, Jonathan Golub, Credit Suisse Chief US Equity Strategist, joins us on the year ahead. John, fantastic to catch up with you again, sir. 2021 and the return to normal, the title of your research, sir. What is normal these days?
Well, first of all, we're trying to really look out and push the horizon and say, you know, what does 22 look like? And the reason we're focused on that is if we're trying to forecast where markets are at the end of 21, it's going to be based on the way the world looks at the end of 21, peering into 2022. And at that point in time, you're looking at not an economy that's bouncing off the bottom with this discussion of cyclicals and low quality stocks. You're looking at an economy that's probably growing GDP in the low to mid threes, which will be very good, but actually slowing because we're moving towards a mid-cycle kind of environment already. Interest rates will probably be a little bit higher, but not dramatically higher. The surprise will be the unemployment rate is expected based on Bloomberg's surveys. The unemployment rate will be, you know, moving towards 5%, towards full employment, because we're going to find that the people who've been unemployed are going to be the easiest to put back to work.
John, let me go to what you do best. And folks, Golub's reports are exceptionally dense with ratios and margins and all that. Tiffany, just as one example, hammered by this pandemic, just came out with a 200 beep margin expansion. I don't know if they go up or down today. I don't care. John Golub, is that the surprise of next year, that corporations adapt and margins are solid or even elevate?
Yeah, Tom. I mean, if you actually look historically, and I know we're getting really in the weeds, the earnings improvement is always on the margin line. Yeah, revenues will be up, you know, a bit. This is obviously a lousy year. Revenues will be back, I don't know, 5% or something like that. But if we're expecting something closer to 20% earnings growth, you're going to get there on the margin line, and I don't know if that's a surprise. It's pretty much what typically happens.
Jonathan, I know that one of your sectors that you like is financials, and we've seen a yield curve that's tried to steepen and failed again and again in some sort of sustained way. What's underpinning your financials call? And John Farrow has raised this point several times. How much does it hinge on the steepening of that yield curve?
Well, I think there's a half dozen things that are really working here. First of all, the banks have reserved for substantial losses. So they're in very good situation with their regulators. Secondly, the regulators have forced them to cut back on dividends and buybacks, and that's most likely going to get released in the second quarter, because my third point is that the loan losses are not getting worse, and they've over-reserved. So you're going to start to see probably around the second quarter, maybe the third quarter, that they're going to be giving more money back to shareholders, and that's going to appear to be a bit of a surprise. From a valuation perspective, relative to the way they normally trade, the two cheapest sectors are financials and healthcare. So you have all of those things working for you, even if you didn't get any yield curve steepness. Now, if you don't have at least a flat to steeper yield curve, the trade's not going to work. But even 15 basis points of steepening over the next 12 months, along with those other positives, is probably all you need for it to be a leading sector.
John, we've got to talk about the regulatory backdrop as well. So much discussions about Chair Yellen, monetary policy, fiscal policy. The last act of the Fed under Chair Yellen wasn't a monetary policy decision. It was a decision to stick the boot in to Wells Fargo. John, do you have a call for next year, your base case on regulation around this administration?
It's a good question, and we need to hear more from regulators. I will tell you the question that we're getting about Janet Yellen in the Treasury role is, what is she going to do to monetary policy, and is she going to do more QE? And the questions are kind of bizarre, because they're really questions as if she was being appointed to another term as Fed chair, not as Treasury secretary. Her role is going to be different. I would assume that there's going to be some real respect for her thinking on those issues, given the role she's been in. But she doesn't control that, and she's going to. It'll be very interesting to see which levers she looks to push.
John, what is your call on the banks, on the financials?
Yeah, we're overweight financials. We have a very strange sector call, or at least historically strange. We think that next year is going to end up being another tech and growth year. So we're overweight what we call tech plus, but we're also overweight financials. And it's that we think the financials are in a much healthier position, or a much more advantageous position, as compared to energy, materials, industrials, traditional cyclicals that do really well as the economy is reaccelerating. We think banks are going to do better because, as I mentioned before, yield curve likely steeper, loan losses coming in less, regulatory backdrop we think will be reasonable.
John, great to catch up with you, sir. Really enjoyed the research through the year, and especially over the last couple of weeks. Enjoy Thanksgiving if we don't catch up. Jonathan Golub there of Credit Suisse. Thank you, sir. This equity market up 27. We advanced 0.75% on the S&P 500. That's the call from the team over at Credit Suisse, Tom. Looking out next year, their call is to get into the future in the future. Get out to the back end of 21 and look out to 22 and think about what that world looks like.
It's a really, really different call. And of course, folks, this is the fun of what we do every day, is you really get some different calls here. But, John, what I'm seeing from Credit Suisse, as he said, is tech and banks. And I mean, it's way away from the conventional one-way call on cyclicals, materials, and the rest of it as well. The one-way call for me, John, is on radio and TV. We do have to really mention how you are developing this influencer kind of thing. I mean, you are influencing the influencers. And to see you, John, I'm really just honored to be with you as you're linked with Malum and Fidesz. I think it's it's amazing.
Well, I'm really hoping that going into year-end, Tom, I can establish some kind of deal with, say, Glossier, and maybe just do this part-time. Yeah, just a male makeup line, something like that.
I can see it.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Good for the climate. you know, that kind of thing. And then maybe you can join with me and we can do it for the older demographic.
I went down
the younger and the older demographic.
I went down in influence flames. I just, it didn't.
We can build out a joint Instagram account. Tom, that'd be really cool.
Oh my God, we gotta go.
All kinds of things.
Save the tots.
Alcoholic beverages. From London and New York this morning. Good morning to all.
Oh, that would be
worldwide.
Could do a simulcast Instagram.
As we work our way through this short and trading week, stateside, this is Bloomberg.
Canoeing.
With the First Word News, I'm Rishka Gupta. President Trump is finally calling on his agencies to cooperate in the formal transition process with Joe Biden. That follows weeks of inaction. The General Services Administration made it official with its acknowledgement that Biden was the apparent winner of the election. Still, President Trump says he'll contest the outcome of the vote. Joe Biden has turned to former Fed Chair Janet Yellen to be his Treasury Secretary. If she's confirmed, Yellen would become the first woman in the job. She's pushed for additional fiscal spending to help the economy get through the pandemic. Yellen's likely to win support from both Wall Street and the Democratic Party progressives. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has confirmed that England's national lockdown will end next week. It will be replaced by a tougher system of regional restrictions designed to last until spring. Rules may be relaxed in time for Christmas. Johnson says that if all goes well, the vast majority of people who need a coronavirus vaccine will get one by April. Goldman Sachs is planning a European stock trading platform in Paris. The aim is to make sure clients can still buy and sell shares, even if there is no post-Brexit agreement to allow dealing in London. Goldman has asked French authorities for permission to start in January. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Rishka Gupta. This is Bloomberg.
Sony's PlayStation 5 went on sale Thursday, and the company hopes it'll become a long-term cash cow. It's a key test for the Japanese company amid the pandemic's gaming boom, and it goes head-to-head with Microsoft's new Xbox. Both consoles have seen solid pre-order sales. The previous console sold 113 million units.
We have some good news in terms of vaccines and a chance to overcome the health crisis, but we are not there yet.
We need the fiscal stimulus, and we need it relatively quickly, because I can see where the second wave's coming. You can see consumer spending beginning to get impacted again.
What we need surveillance to be stronger. We need public health measures, because you have no other way at the beginning. This is your best weapon, and you need to use it well.
The good news is that both the vaccines and the therapeutics, in particular the antibodies, are coming along and will start to bring that number way down.
We don't just need more investment in public health. We must also rethink how we value health.
I do believe a targeted fiscal stimulus is going to be in order to really begin a more equalized economy.
our generation's biggest problem.
Climate change is happening.
And the world's most innovative solutions.
Transport, industry, buildings, electricity, all of those things.
Everything you need to know about our changing environment, the politics of global warming.
We can and we will deal with climate change.
In the fight against climate change, Bloomberg Green has you covered.
Position closed on euro at 118.752. We have a profit 500 pounds.
Chair of the Fed and now Secretary of Treasury. So I think she's been very good at trying to build relationships across the aisle in Congress, and I think she has a very good focus on really trying to get things done.
It's a different skill set, and that's the challenge for former Chair Yellen as she is tipped to take over the Treasury. That was Randy Crosner there, the former Fed governor. Alongside Tom Keene and Lisa Abramovich this morning, I'm Jonathan Ferro. Good morning to you all from London and New York. Here's the price action this Tuesday morning. We had a little bit more weight to the rally over the last couple of weeks. On the S&P 500 up 26, we advanced 0.7% and through 3,600. The outperformance has come from the small caps. Yesterday up 1.85%. This morning the Russell up another 1.36. The small caps in America on fire at the moment. In the FX market, euro dollar 118.75. More broadly,